Today's lecture is ambitious, and it covers the waterfront, but one of the things I want to do is convince you that public health, by the way, is this course, but public health, if you look at all the colleges across the land, universities across the land, this particular topic is the fastest growing topic of all topics at any university, public health. Why? Because I don't care if you're in engineering, you're in agriculture, most of you happen to be in the sweet spot of health sciences, so you know the language, you know the lexicon of health. But I don't care what frame of work that you're in, you can't escape the issues of public health, whether you're into it in terms of someone who's a healthcare professional or someone who benefits from that process. And so I want to make that case, and I'll do my best to do that today for you. And hopefully I can annotate. Yes, I think I can. Hang on. No, of course not. What's that? Is that what's happening here? Oh, ink color, okay. And then right here? All right, there we go. Okay, of course it's the wrong color. I don't like that color. Yeah, let's try that. Oh, yeah. One more time. If it doesn't work, I'm going to give up. Okay, is that working? All right, sorry. Forget about it. We're going to go with red. So, in today's class, the first thing you want to ask yourself at the beginning is that, how do we define health? Because there's a difference between health and public health. And so when we look at the World Health Organization's definition of health, it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So when we look at health, we're looking at the individual. We're not looking at a group of people. And that's one of the key differences. So when someone comes to you and they say, well, you have to reduce your weight, you have to eat better, you have to sleep more, you have to reduce your stress, all that stuff. That's on an individual basis, but collectively, the reason they're giving this information is that there's a group benefit from these recommendations, and it's the group that gets into the public health element of this. So when we ask the question, what is public health versus health, then there are lots of definitions out there. And what I like is the simpler the definition, the more elegant it is, the better people will understand it and get their minds wrapped around it. So lots of organizations have these long, what I call treatises on what is public health, because it's such a complex thing. And as you can see here, organized efforts of society to protect, promote, and restore people's health. It goes on with a combination of skills and science and beliefs and so on. It talks about goals to reduce the amount of disease, premature death, disease-produced discomfort and disability in the population, and the definitions continue. If we go and look at it from a perspective of it in our language, it's a noun, the science and practice of protecting and improving the health of a community. Keep in mind, see, the community versus the individual. That's really the distinction here. As by preventive medicine, health education, control of communicable diseases, application of sanitary measures, and monitoring of environmental hazards. If we go a little bit further, say the health or physical well-being of a whole community. See how it's getting shorter and more succinct? The science and art of preventing disease, prolonging life, and promoting health through organized efforts of a society. And so when we look at these various definitions, realize that every single one, the common denominator, it is a denominator, is about community, right? It's about a group, and it's not about the individual. So when we talk about health, we're really focusing on the individual. When we talk about public health, we're really talking about a group of people, a community coming together, organizing, not only in terms of health, disease prevention, but health promotion. So how do we make public health work? You have to make it work within the law, the framework of public health law, and this is a large and diverse array of laws and government policies that affect public health directly and indirectly. We use the term public health law to include statutory laws, establish public health programs and authorities of public health officials and so on. We do regulations regarding food safety, water quality, hazardous waste disposal, and occupational safety. Think about the water quality issues that are happening in Charleston, West Virginia right now. I don't know if you've seen the news, but they had a leak from a very toxic chemical, and very poor communications there. When we had the avian flu issue that came through Purdue, we decided who's going to be the spokesperson in terms of informing the students and the community about what to do in terms of a huge outbreak of influenza. In this case, they have a major problem, a spill that's in their drinking water. So they started out, no one can drink the water, take a shower in this business because the levels were high. And now, today, this morning, they're saying, well, everyone can pretty much drink it within these certain areas except women who are pregnant. And I say, what? You know, what? And it turns out EPA has no regulatory standard on this process and chemicals, so no one really knows what the threshold is, but apparently it's okay for me to drink it and you to drink it, but if you're pregnant, or maybe you don't even know if you're pregnant, but if you're pregnant, you can't drink the stuff. And I say, what is going on here? So what we came up with when the avian flu process came through Purdue and said, what do we do in terms of an outbreak? We decided that there wasn't going to be one spokesperson, there would be two. And those two would be the mayor and a public health official. Usually it's a designated public health official for Tippecanoe County that would basically say, in tandem, this is what the health issues are, this is what you need to do from a public health point of view, and the mayor was there to make sure the resources were enforced and backed up in terms of executing those particular practices. But they're not doing that in Charleston, West Virginia. It's just completely gotten out of control, and it's really unfortunate because I think those people are hurting right now. So we do have laws with this, but so much of the business of what we're in, if you remember nothing else about this class, say, well, I took a public health class. You can also say, I took a communications class. It happened to be on the topic of public health, because that's what this is all about. It's really about effective communications. So we have ordinances related to land use and transportation and contracts between public health agencies, managed care organizations, and so on. So making the case, why is this important to you? First, the facts, because I'm going to start out, at a very high level, and then we're going to get down more and more. And what this is all about is to give you denominator information, because as I mentioned, if you don't have denominator information, numerator information is not going to help you at all. If I tell you so many people died of a certain disease, it's not going to mean anything to you unless you put it in proportion to what that denominator is in terms of those exposed. So to start out with, I printed this off from the World Clock this morning. If you go on the U.S. And World Population Clock, you can see that we're over 7 billion people on the planet. And that number on the very end, I just did a screenshot of it. It was just rolling so fast. It was like moving to the next number as I did the screenshot. And we're collecting. There are a number of books coming out about where is the threshold in terms of the world population. Some people are putting that threshold at 10 billion. And then after that, all kinds of interesting things are going to happen. So it's interesting. So it's not 10 billion and one. All of a sudden, the sky falls in on you. But they're basically saying what is sustainable and where can we maintain a quality of life that we know in terms of what the planet can provide. So we're starting to see some of these outcomes as you may notice with the weather and so on. In the United States, we have 317 million people. And this is not something I'm throwing out. I will test you on this. So if someone asks you how many people live on the planet, you went to Purdue, you're going to say, well, as of the winter of 2014, about 7 billion people. And how many people live in the United States? Well, as of the winter of 2014, about 317 million people. You got to know that. That makes you sound smart. Actually, makes you sound informed, because that is denominator data. Because then you can start playing with that and say, well, divide 317 million by 7 billion people, and that gives you the percentage of people that are in the United States, right? And what's our impact on the world, right? As world leaders, certainly in the economic side of things. And then if you go to this world clock, which is kind of fun, these have these moving bars. I'm hoping this may want to work. Ugh. Well, I can use my my pointer. These things here, these have moving bars, and it's showing you one birth every 8 seconds, one every 12 seconds, and so these bars are going back and forth. One international migrant every 40 seconds. That's the United States, and you'll see that we're not growing by our own efforts. We're under replacement. So the only way that the United States is growing is by allowing immigrants to come into the United States and become citizens in time. So we look at this and we say, okay, well, in terms of United States, we look at the regions, and this is the Northwest, Midwest, West, and South by these color bands here, this being the South, down here, up here being the Northwest. And you can see there's steady growth, but where most of the people are in terms of total population, you're seeing that really a lot of people are getting out of this kind of climate and moving to warmer climates down into the South and so on. Texas especially has seen a lot of growth, and more and more people are moving there because of the economic conditions. But what I want to show you is something that's kind of important when you look at this bar, United States population by age and index right here. Most really healthy populations in terms of supporting social causes and issues and so on. Let's say healthcare, uniform healthcare, tend to be pyramids like this. The idea being that the base supports the top as you go up. But as you can see here, this is not really that much of a pyramid. It's really more linear, right? It's in terms of going up. So obviously, as you get older like this, you die off. But when you go and look at these percentages right here between males and females, it's pretty much almost uniform all the way up till about the age of 60. So the idea of, if you try to connect the dots, if you look at the whole aspects of healthcare reform that have gone into play, and you look at the Affordable Care Act, which is really health insurance, that the idea is that the healthy population is to support those who are older and have to have claims and so on and so forth. But every day in the United States, 10,000 people turn 65. In the United States alone, 10,000 people turn 65, which means they go into Medicare, right? So that's now on the government system, which is on the taxpayers. So when you look at these kinds of things, and you look at different countries, look at how they're shaped. The pyramid shaped is the best because the base is supporting those that are higher up because of the income and so on and so forth. But when you get more into sort of a silo figure right here, it becomes a little bit dicey. And you say, how can this group right here, who's healthy, support this group here? Not so much. One of the interesting facts is that if you get when you get up to this age right here, supposing you live to that time, 80% of all of your medical costs, this is a fact, 80% of all your medical costs are incurred the last 2 years of your life. That's a big deal. You think about that, because who's supporting that, and are we going to change our policies and laws in terms of someone aging and then gracefully exiting, from this world? Those are tough calls, and I think that's something that you're going to deal with as you age up. So when we get by regions, Northwest, Midwest, Northeast, Midwest, West, and South, we see our populations right here and distribution. We see that in the West and in the South, we have the larger percentages of the population, and that's pretty much where things are going in terms of migration. A lot of people are moving to the West, they're moving to the South. Mostly, these are what you're looking at are the baby boomers that are aging up, retiring, and moving to climates that are more receptive. But also, when you have that kind of migration, you also see younger populations moving there too, because that's where the jobs are. So it's something to look at. When you look at most populous and highest density, I was having some fun with this. This is California is the most populated, followed by Texas, then New York, Florida, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina. If you look at the highest density, District of Columbia, so Washington, D.C., then there's New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maryland, Delaware, New York, Florida, and Pennsylvania by density. And then if we go by cities, New York is the most populous, followed by Los Angeles and Chicago. And you can read the list all the way down at the end to San Jose. And then when you look at density, you're looking at Gutenberg Town, New Jersey. Who knew? Right? That was so dense there. Then Union City. Look at New Jersey. How dense is New Jersey? They're all just jammed in there. And Governor Christie probably likes that, but maybe not so much toll bridges. Who knows? So if we look at quick facts in terms of the U.S., as for Indiana and comparing it to the U.S., we tested on this. We have 6.5 million people in Indiana. It's a nice denominator, or it could be a numerator if we're comparing it to the United States, with showing here, at least in terms of when this thing was put together, about 316. But now we're around 317 million people in the United States. But we've been slowly gaining as I've been here. But almost 10 years ago, we were at 6 million people in Indiana, and we've only gained about 500,000 people. We're not growing very fast at all. And that's part of the whole migration of a lot of people, especially Michigan. People are just leaving Michigan in droves because of its issues, which I think is kind of a mistake because of the Great Lakes and the resources they have there, but moving to the south and to the west and so on. So Indiana is gaining, but not gaining very fast. And then if you look at some of the other things that are up there in terms of breakdown by percent of people under 5, it pretty much compares with the U.S. Those at 18, about the same. Those older, about the same. Females, the percent, about half. And so you can see some of the other data that's there. When we look at Tippecanoe County, you're asking yourself, okay, so I'm getting more and more refined here. We look at Tippecanoe County. Well, they didn't have anything in an estimate, but in 2012, it came up with 177,000. So I'm going to just round that to about 178,000 people in Tippecanoe County. I would have thought more people in Tippecanoe County, but that's what the data shows us. And the percentages are a little bit different here. When you look at those over 65, it's a smaller percentage compared to Indiana. Female percentage just about the same as what you find in the state of Indiana, and so on. So here's a way of comparing where we are. And then if you look at West Lafayette, the percentage right here, they've got about 30,500 or so, and you say, well, that doesn't make any sense because, Purdue has 40,000 students. Well, they don't count the students. They only count permanent residents here, those that have households and pay taxes and so on. I would have thought more, but that's what we have, almost 31,000 here. So you got 31,000 here in Tippecanoe County, 177,000. In Indiana, 6.5 million. In the United States, 317 million. In the world, 7 billion. So all of a sudden you see, wow, okay, I'm starting to get an idea about the numbers, because the numbers are important in terms of resources and what we have available to take care of the issues that may come up relating to public health. So I took it a little bit further, went into Purdue, and look, it's dated. I was really surprised. I figured with our president, he'd be all over this stuff in terms of stats and facts, right there, always being posted. So this is about a year off. So I was really surprised about this, to go on our own website and find it. But basically, what it shows is pretty much what I was saying. Our undergraduate population here is around about 25,000. Remainder being the graduate population, and then we have a cumulative total of over 433,000 alums. So we have a great network out there, which is pretty cool. And I don't know how many of you travel. I travel all over the world pretty extensively, and And there's not a place that I've gone. I was in Namibia last year, for example, in a bar of all places. I was taken there. I didn't go there by myself. To have some game food, which is a pretty common thing in Namibia. And we're just chit-chatting, and lo and behold, someone heard us talk about Purdue and said, hey, I graduated from Purdue, and we got into a big, long conversation. Next thing you know, the evening went on, and we had a lot of fun. But it's amazing how many people that you run into that have graduated from here, which is, I think, a great thing. But when you look at the faculty, about 1,800 faculty, but in terms of the supporting cast, we're up to about 15, almost 16,000 that totally support you. If you think about it, without you, we wouldn't be doing this, right? Unless we were maybe an independent research group or something like the RAND Corporation. But think about the leverage of that, is that basically for the 40,000 students that we have, including the graduate students, there's almost 16,000 people here to support your education and to help you move forward. We look at historic enrollment. As you know, we were established in 1869, so there wasn't a lot happening then, but in terms of any real classes, things really got underway in 1874. But you've noticed that when you get out here in terms of total, it says about 39,000, so I rounded around 40,000. But we've really been kind of flat over the past 5-6 years. We haven't increased that. My prediction is that with the president holding your tuition flat for another year, he's going to propose it to the trustees. I think there's a good chance it's going to pass, that you're not going to see a tuition increase. That's great. But there are other pressures, obviously. The tuition's not increasing, the state not giving any more money, and that would be probably bringing in more students, opening the door to bring in more students. I'm predicting that that's probably going to open up to many more international students to be able to come in and enjoy the reputation and the educational quality that you get at Purdue. So keep an eye on that. In terms of the world growth and population, the interesting thing is that when you look at this overall trend, it's downward. So by sheer numbers, by volume, we're growing. It's 7 billion plus. We have these challenges because you see this right here, totally growing. Take that all the way out here to about 2050, and it's showing about 9 billion people, and most of you will be on the planet then. Is that what kind of pressures are going to be there versus what you have now? Because what's happening is that people are not going out and having more than their replacement rate. In most countries, especially the developed countries, it's less than 2. So this is why you see that downward trend. So when we look at the world, they're predicting 8.1 billion in 2025. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. If there are no pandemics, no major environmental disasters, and so on and so forth, that mark will probably get hit at over 8 billion right there. Now you're talking about just another 25 years for another billion people. That'll be interesting to see how that forecast comes into play. When we look at top 10 countries by highest population, China still leads the world. India is catching up. As you can see, they're right behind them. And we're number 3. But, being number 3, we're a distant third compared to China and India. And if you look at the population here in 2000, about 1.3. 10 years later, about the same, a little bit more in China. Another 2 years later after that, a little bit more, but holding steady. I know the policies are changing in China now about the one-child rule and so on and so forth, but what's happened with the one-child rule, and because of the culture in China, they now have a surplus of about 25 million more males than they do females in China. And so it's going to be real interesting to see the social dynamics of what happens there with all these males that aren't matched up, because as the odds are, it's a 50-50 shot. It can be a female or a male, but if you have policies that intercede, that impact on culture, then what happens is that there is a greater likelihood that the culture being what it is there, that a one child, they want a boy. And as a result of that, there are 25 million more boys than there are girls. And you can if you go in and you dig into the history a little bit there, and you look at the evolution of technology in terms of sonograms and so on and so forth, you can kind of figure out what happened. But to me, any population has an excess like that of 25 million people, even though you have 1.3 billion. There's going to be some interesting things that evolve from that discrepancy. India is coming up. They have their other challenges. You can see they're at 1 billion in 2000, about almost 1.2 billion in 2010, and then now they're well over the 1.2 billion going after it. And they don't have a one-child rule, and in many instances, the culture there is in some parts of India is basically an heir and a spare. And an heir and a spare means like they got two males, just in case one falls off. They got a backup. So you may have 3 or 4 girls, and then, oh boy, we got to have a male. Oh, good, got a male. Keep going until we get another male. And I'm not saying that's across the board, but that's generally what I pick up when I go to India and I talk with the folks over there in the public health side of the equation in terms of how do you maintain a quality of life with so many children. And part of that's the cultural dynamics of having at least a male in the family, and it's always good to have a second. In the United States, we obviously don't have those policies either, but you can see we're growing. But as you'll see as I get into this presentation, we're growing mostly by immigration. We are not growing by replacing ourselves and going above and beyond. And then if you follow down, number 4 is Indonesia. So a lot of times I'll ask you in class as a quiz question, maybe exam question, the most populous country in the world, so on and so forth. Because you know this, India is second, the United States is third. I may ask you about what's the 4th one. A lot of people won't come up with that. You know it's Indonesia. Okay, that's that whole collection of people over in the Indonesian area of the world, and they're growing, and it's a collection of countries. Next is Brazil, then Pakistan. And what I always find interesting when you look at Africa, because Africa's got lots and lots of challenges, is that when you look at the map, the geographic map of Nigeria and Africa, they don't have that much land. But look at how many people are over there, and they're growing. Oh, I don't want to write. Jesus, I'm really got some challenges here. So if you look at Nigeria, 170 million people in that small little country. So they are crawling all over each other. So it's amazing. Then we have Bangladesh, Russia, and if you look at Russia, they went down in 2010, but they've come back just a little bit. They're continuing to lose people over there for lots of reasons. But then Russia's 9th, and then Japan is 10th. We look at the average percent increase. What you see is that the increases are in the reds down here, and the losses in terms of net loss between countries that are gains are up here in the yellow. So talk about Russia, this area right here. Well, they're kind of keeping up with Antarctica, but up here we have Greenland, Iceland, others. We're not seeing a whole lot. Some of the countries here in Europe. But United States is just down from that, as is Canada. Mexico is a little bit higher. Most of South America is pretty much like the United States, Argentina, Brazil, and so on. But there are some that are a little bit higher, as is Mexico. But look at Africa. Africa, they're producing a lot more children per couple, but as you'll see into this, the fatality rate is high, or you see the infant mortality rate is very high over there because many don't live beyond the 2 years of age, and many not beyond 5 because of many of the infectious diseases over there. Much of it foodborne infections and so on that kill off the children. But they do have a very high birth rate. So one of the things that's kind of interesting is we've heard a lot about people collecting data and so on and so forth. But you can go actually on the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA website. I'm pretty sure they don't backtrack and say who's looking at us, but they have a great world fact book. Anything that you'd ever want to know about any country in terms of its economy, import-export business, its geography, political tension, so on and so forth, you can find it. in here, over 200 countries listed in here with all the facts you'd ever want to know. And one of the things that I was looking at, of course, is Africa and where it's having a lot of challenges and so on. Even though South Africa got rid of apartheid and so on, it has a number of different challenges. And then there's Namibia right there. I referred to that a little bit earlier, the country that I went to. It's only about 4 million people, not many at all. Think about Nigeria, 170 million people, right? And so what happened with Namibia, it's got pressures from Angola coming in, and Zambia, and Botswana. A lot of people trying to come into that country. Why is that? Because it used to be called West South Africa. It was really part of the South African enterprise, and it became an independent country about 20 years ago, and it was taken over by the governments there and so on. But the benefit that it has all the infrastructure that you don't see in a lot of other parts of Africa. It's got highway systems that are just as good as they are here, oil refineries and so on and so forth. It looks like if you were to just close your eyes and wake up and look around, you would think you were in some place out west. A lot of desert there, by the way, but it's absolutely beautiful country. So we look at the population, United States, in terms of growth, and this is where I was really coming down to. When you look at where we were in terms of growth rates, in the 1950s, we were doing pretty good, close to replacing ourselves, right, in terms of that growth rate. But if you look at just projecting out here to, let's see, where we are right now, let's see, this is about our closest one. You see, about 0.9, not even half, in terms of number of children per couple, right? And then, of course, it's going to steadily decline from there. So the only growth that we're going to see is by bringing people in from the outside. So if we look at successive billions in world population, look at the time span in terms of doubling here. 118 years, really, to go from up to 1 billion in 1804 to 1922. And then going up to the next one, up to 2 billion at this stage, and then 3 billion, as you can see right here, only 37 years. And then it's projected out is that we're going faster and faster, only 15 years. Be here to go up to 4 billion from 59 to 74. And then kind of where we are right now, with about 14 years, right here we come across, and sure enough, about 7 billion people, and 2013. So it's going to slow down a little bit, as I mentioned, because we're not replacing ourselves as much on a global basis. So still the idea is that we're going to continue to climb and to 10 billion people. So in looking at different countries in terms of growth, in the 50s, China was still the most populous. Then we had the developed world, and then we had India, and the rest of Asia and Oceania and so on, going all down, Eastern Europe, all these populations. But then when you got to 2002, China had grown quite a bit right here. India had not so much, and comparing it to the rest of the world. But then by 2050, if we look at the changes right here in terms of China, excuse me, this is India right here, and we look at India, India surpasses China in terms of total population. So it's going to be real interesting in terms of the cultural footprint on the world from that particular country. So here's a nice breakdown visually to see how this is. China, India, United States, China, India, United States, and then 2050, India, China, and the United States. And then rankings of future past tens. If you look at where countries are, you see that Russia has fallen off the top 10 list and so on, and as all these countries have. But keep in mind in terms of the populations and growth and dynamics. So this is a slide that I captured in 2002, and it still applies, but I like it because it includes the state of Indiana down here. And what it basically is showing you in terms of growth, that we look per second, 2.5 people per second. Actually, we're showing their scale is actually 5 people, right, that I showed you a little bit earlier. And then per minute, a plane load of people, 141 people per day, filling up a couple of stadiums. Per month, filling up the state of Indiana. per year, 74 million, about the population of Egypt. And then, of course, over the next 5 years, we would completely fill up Western Europe. So it shows you how fast we're growing in terms of scale and time. When we look at age, age is a factor right here because we're saying across the board in terms of global life expectancy, things are getting better, which is great. More and more developing countries are becoming developed countries in terms of the use of that technology and so on. And then some of that technology is going into those developing countries and helping those populations. So we're looking at about an average of about 76, 77 years of age across the planet. But when we look at countries that have the longest age in years, for example, and we come up, now again, this is about denominators, so if you think about Monaco, right, okay, that's a really nice city. Can't afford to live there, but those that do live there live well, right? So that's number one. And they get up to about almost 90 years of age, average. There's a lot of old people there. And then we have Macau and Japan and Singapore, and we on down the list. And there was just some that just came up like Guernsey. And I said, good Lord, I've heard of it, but I have no idea. It's near Normandy, right? It's just a small little, kind of island country that has a very high years of age in terms of people living, which is kind of interesting. So some of this is driven by small denominators, but you look at others like Canada. Okay, those guys are doing pretty good. They're number 13, and they're about 81, almost 82 years of age in terms of lifespan. Pretty cool. Now you might be asking yourself, where's the United States? They're not even here, yet we're supposed to have some of the best health care in the world. We have some of the best machines in the world, but some may debate about the health care side of it. Well, guess what? We showed up 51 countries down the list. We showed up at about 78.6 years. And as things go, the females outlast the males, and they usually outlast them by average about 2 to 3 years. So that average of 78 includes males and females. So you can basically push the males down about a year and a half and the females up about a year and a half in terms of average. And then you go in and say, well, we're the worst countries, in terms of longevity. Keep in mind, in 1900, the average lifespan was less than 50. People didn't live beyond the age of 50. That's one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of cancer and other issues and so on with when you age up. So when we think about living to 80 and 90 and so on, especially you look at some of these famous people and say, wow, they lived to the age of 78 or 80 or something like that. That was an anomaly because most people weren't past the age of 50. So when you go down here now and you say, well, where are the worst countries to live right now? Chad. Chad's unfortunately at the bottom, which also tells you the number of countries we have in the world. 223, 49. That's it. They're not even breaking 50 in terms of average. So a lot of people dying off before, but that's their average. Then look what's next. South Africa, just above Chad. You would think it would be better. I'm hoping it will be better because of the change that has happened there. But you can work your way up. Swaziland, which is within South Africa, by the way. It's got lots of issues with HIV/AIDS and so on. Then we have Afghanistan, Somalia, and so on. Most of these in Africa. So most people there don't live past the age of 50. And this is our breakdown in terms of fertility rates. I talked about that a little bit. And look, very high fertility rates, but also very high mortality rate, right, because of all the issues that challenge them. United States, pretty much below replacement up here. You get down a little bit higher in Mexico. Get along the borders here, Chile and so on, a little bit higher, but Brazil, not so much. Argentina, a little bit higher. But you see higher fertility rates, but also higher mortality rates that offsets that. So we looked at historical projected growth, United States. Again, that growth is really by immigration. And we see we get out there 2050 about 400 million. And then we look at growth within the United States, and I was looking around and say, how's Indiana doing in terms of percent change? Because I'm always interested in our lovely state. And you can see right here, we're right about there. Not much in terms of about a little over 5% change and so on. And as you saw from the numbers, we're gaining, but we're not gaining a lot. Where they're really picking up on this one, this is 2010. Dynamics have changed a little bit. This one's gotten a little more red, if you will, because more people moving to Texas. But Nevada was a great place. Most of these are the baby boomers moving out there and so on. As a result of that, there is a large support industry to be able to support the baby boomers. So that's where you get your biggest changes. So again, out to the west and to the south in terms of growth. Okay, what does the United States look like at night? I always love these night shots, right? In terms of where all the people are. Somewhere in here is New Jersey. I'm sure Gutenberg, New Jersey's in there. All that high density right there. But the eastern seaboard, you can see, is pretty lit up. Down in Florida, we're pretty lit up. Here we are in the Midwest. That's Chicago. So on, we get down to Atlanta. Over here, we have California with San Francisco, Los Angeles, and so on. Up here, we get into Seattle. Not a whole lot happening out here, right? North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana. Beautiful country, by the way, but not too many people. And that's why you don't see a lot of lights. But then when you get to a world view of things, say, how do we compare to the world in terms of lighting up the planet? We do a pretty good job. Here's Europe. All these countries in Europe, in Japan. Japan's on fire, man. They love lights. They're down there. And then come down here, Australia. Here's old Perth. The most isolated, populated place on the planet. Perth, Australia. Just an amazing place. Then we have New Zealand down here, which is kind of fun. South Africa. Not a lot of lights in Africa. Then of course, we got Brazil, as I mentioned, Argentina, and so on, and then along the border here, Mexico's getting fired up. Mexico City, right there. But you can see the distribution of basically the developed world by looking at light patterns. So where are things in terms of the economy? Because now I'm starting to shift gears on you a little bit, and I'm taking you down the road of saying, well, if this is about public health and you talk about all this other stuff, how does this have any relevance whatsoever? In order to maintain a certain sense of prosperity and moving forward, you need to have money, right? So as most of you know, and you probably heard from your parents, going back in 2007 was the downhill slide in terms of the stock market and so on and so forth. People had literally lost millions of dollars in personal savings and so on and so forth. And if they panicked and got out, they really took it in the shorts. But if they stayed the course, you can see what happened. It all came back, right? And then some, which is great. So as long as we're doing okay here, we're at, I guess, 1,600 right now in terms of the stock exchange, the S&P. We are able to sustain a certain quality of life. When we look at the national debt clock, that's the big one that keeps coming up. And I find people are getting more and more on the fringe in terms of just total panic from this to, hey, whatever. To in the middle say, I got some concerns. And I got some concerns. I think we all should have concerns because it's basically saying every person that comes to the United States is born into the United States. I have grandchildren, by the way. They come with a sticker shock of almost $55,000 slapped on them and saying, you haven't done anything yet and you owe us 55 grand. I said, well, you haven't given me anything yet. I said, well, I don't care. You owe me 55 grand. That's the national debt as it breaks down per capita. But $17 trillion should take some notice by some of you, certainly by me, is that you have to do something. But the problem is everyone knows something has to be done, but the problem is no one wants anything taken from what they have. So in there, cut that. No, you can't cut this. No, you can't cut that. No, you better not cut that. If you cut that, that's going to be a disaster. And so, where do you cut, or where do you grow? So I'm of the mind that the people out there to look at this are looking at the pie as it is. I'm the person who looks at the pie as it is, and I said, I want to make that pie bigger. I want to figure out more ways in which we can make more money and start paying down this thing, rather than taking it out of somebody. What can we do to put it back in? And we're not hearing enough of that. We're hearing a lot about the doomsday coming and so on and so forth. Yet, being the most prosperous country in the world, we can figure this thing out because our GDP, you'll see pretty close, coming up, is fairly close to what the debt is. So we have an opportunity to pay this down. So the gross domestic product then represents the total value of goods and services produced by an economy over some unit of time. The domestic part of the name comes from the fact that unlike the GNP, it does not consider imports or exports into the calculation. So this is basically what we do. So if we look at this, the GDP by major countries, in the EU we have the United States right here. So this is in 2000, and then you look at 2015, we're still coming up here. But the thing to notice is look at China. You know, China, when I first started teaching this class, they were under, their GDP was under $1 trillion a year. It was under. Japan was the next in the ranking. They were about $4 trillion, and we were head and shoulders above everybody else. We were about $10 trillion or so. And you can see, as time has gone on right here, that the United States is still bringing in the money, right around almost 14, 15 trillion. But China went from, in 2000, just about $5 trillion right here, right on up to about $12 trillion right there. And you look at the rate of growth for China right here between 2000 and 2015 versus our growth and the rest of the world, and they are going to be on the world stage. There's just no denying the opportunity that's there. So we'll see how that evolves, but everyone needs to pay attention to that, and the thing is that we are a global community, and we need to make sure that in the desire for all of us to have a quality of life, there's some balance there, especially when it comes to public health. So when we look at the healthcare spending by this, look at the United States right here, and we're spending more than anybody else. Next up is Switzerland, then there's France and Germany and Belgium, all the way down the list. But we are just head and shoulders ahead of everybody on this business, and so it's a challenge as to why we're spending so much money, and we seem to be getting little in return. Especially we're 51 in the world chart for countries in terms of longevity. So survey finds increasing healthcare costs for retirees and continues erosion of benefits. There's lots of challenges out there with that. When we look at actual and projected, here's the big one. This is the elephant in the living room right here. The Medicare, Medicaid issues, especially now comes into play with the Affordable Care Act coming fully online in terms of people having to sign up. Social Security, notice this is somewhat flatline. A lot of you worry, I'm not going to see Social Security when I reach a certain age. It is solvent. It is basically paying for itself. The problem is that the government is borrowing from Social Security to pay the other coffers. That's the issue right now. So they're basically spending down the money that's in Social Security, which they shouldn't be doing, but they're saying with the promise they're going to pay it back, right? So it should be there. It should be solvent, but this is going to be the challenge right here, these costs. So what is the future of healthcare reform under the Obama administration? Well, one of the things I'll talk about a little bit later is the Affordable Care Act, and it really is not about health care, the Affordable Care Act. It's really about the Affordable Health Insurance Act, in my opinion. So we're looking at roughly about almost 50 million people of the 317 million people we have in this country that don't have insurance. And so what happens if an emergency comes along, we are by law required to accept someone into the emergency room and take care of them. So how are you going to pay for that? I got no money. Okay, then it's basically going to be kicked back to those that do have insurance. That's one of the reasons why when you take an ambulance to the hospital, it's $1,000, because you're subsidizing all those others that they didn't have the money to pay for it. So what all this whole Affordable Care Act is trying to do is sort of level this out a little bit and say everyone needs to buy into this. If you don't buy into it, there's going to be a penalty. But the idea is that up to 30 million people will then finally gain some insurance through this act. And the idea is that we want to bring in 6.6 million young adults, because chances of the young adults making any claims on that are going to be much less than an older adult and so on. And this is how it's going to be solvent. So this has never been done before, an experiment on this scale. Because you say, well, there are other countries that do that. You know, Canada does this, Australia does this, New Zealand does this, Europe does this. Well, as you saw from the numbers, we're the third largest country in the world. No one's done this at this scale. So that's the difference. So now moving to the larger canvas and looking at the focus on outbreaks and epidemics around the world. The question is, can we protect ourselves from the big one? Good. Okay, I'm going to move along pretty quickly. Also, I want to recognize Dr. Cole for her help in this second part of it, because I wanted to update what the current issues are. So we're going to move along pretty fast. Don't bother taking notes, just because we're going to be recording this, and you'll have these posted. So The Mideast respiratory virus syndrome, coronavirus, has been a big issue. It's been now that it's been moving around that country and in Europe and so on, and a lot of people have this. So put that on your radar. If you've not heard of MERS, CoV, it's something that's going to show up. Remember avian flu? Well, it's back, and it's something to pick up on. Over 600 people have contracted the H5N1 virus, and experts point out that cross-infection to humans is still relatively rare and usually occurs when people have been in close contact with infected birds. We're starting to see this now as an issue in China.
And in Canada.
And in Canada now. So why is there concern about H5N1? One, obviously the avian influenza virus does not usually spread to humans. So basically, if you do get it, you're likely to die from it because your immunity isn't good enough to fight it off. H7N9 avian influenza is coming on strong now as a subgroup of viruses. First reported in China last year. Now it's spread to Hong Kong with 2 other deaths, so something to pay attention to. Geographical distribution, you can see right here spreading around all through China, and these different cases are coming up. So what's next? Mutation, which direction, same, worse, or better? Seasonal flu. As of this past week, we see that very high down in the south. Right here, Indiana is about a little less than that, but look right next to us in Illinois and Kentucky. It's likely that because of the movement of traffic in and out of those states that we're going to probably move into that red zone next month. When we look at the flu view, a number of different regions going on, and the flu is expected to be worse this year than last year. We look at microbial concerns. There were 5,000 kinds of viruses, 1,000 species of fungus, 300 species of bacteria, countless parasites, and so on. It makes you really want to hide under the covers. Don't come out for the day when you have all that stuff going on. Keep in mind that there are some diseases making comebacks, such as tuberculosis and polio and malaria. Although the great news is that in India they actually were able to wipe it out, and it's one of those things where we were able to wipe out smallpox in the world. Huge victory in India, and great for that country that they've wiped out polio there. But it's not wiped out in other countries, so it'd be great to get it off the planet. And you look at the breakdown in terms of issues with high burden countries and sources of tuberculosis. India is right at the top there, followed by China, then Indonesia. We look at HIV, still a major problem out there. We don't hear a lot about it, but we're talking about 5 million people are infected worldwide, and 3 million of those people will die. But we're starting to develop these cocktails now where people can last and have somewhat of a normal life. You look at Magic Johnson; he's been carrying this for years, and he's still around. The papillomavirus. This is a big one, especially in females. Sexually transmitted infections. And of course, the big issue there was that they had the vaccine for women, but the guys were the carriers, right? So they're spreading it around. The women are getting their immunization, and the guys are carriers, and say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And now the guys are starting to have a lot of these issues. Insurance companies weren't carrying them, and now it turns out they can develop cancers as well. So now the insurance companies have moved, shifted their policies on that. FDA licenses for new vaccines and so on, cervical cancer. It's out there, and it's been shown effective. It's somewhat controversial because they want to give it to women before they become sexually active. And it's a little bit of a hassle because you used to have it in 3 doses. West Nile virus, still a major issue. Big cases up in this part. Mosquitoes love it up in that part of the country, and then down here in Louisiana and Mississippi. And we look at the distribution. It's interesting because when it started, and Dr. Howell, who's coming next week, basically it started here, and it's worked its way all the way across the country in different counties. Remember I talked about that on Tuesday, about that pond, that holding pond, the culvert issue got resolved and so on. So it's here as well. When we look at the cumulative distribution and the cases here from Alabama to Wyoming, it's in every single state. Texas obviously has got some major challenges there with a high number. Generally speaking then, infectious diseases kill more than 14 million people per year. Over a quarter of those deaths worldwide, and more than half of them are in developing countries. And we look at Haiti. Remember that was on the radar. And some of you have gone down there. Maybe you had older sisters and brothers from earlier classes that went down to Haiti to help out. Still got problems down there in terms of health care. You look at the people in this emergency room here and all kinds of challenges that they had. Thank God you're here and you don't have issues there, because they really don't have the resources other than what's handed to them and help from outside to be able to bring their lives back to normal. When we look at man-made disasters that come up, we also have to think about environmental impact too. These big typhoons. This is over in the Pacific. Of course, we know them as hurricanes here. But look at what happened recently in the Philippines. Those people were hammered with this huge typhoon that came through, wiped out just about everything. They're doing the best they can, and they're just really living, in little shelter tents and so on and so forth in the Philippines. They're hanging in. Chances are, if you call in a help desk or something of that nature and try to get something done on your phone, more often than not, you're actually talking to someone in the Philippines now. It used to be in India. But a lot of that's just shifted over to the Philippines. It's cheaper. But you're going to be talking to someone there at a service desk talking with you, and those people know the impact of what happened to them here. Diseases and prevention, Philippines, measles, polio vaccinations, and so on. So now they're starting to see that issue coming up. When we look to infectious diseases, important statistic that is since 1973. Think about this. Since 1973, a new infectious disease has been identified every year that never existed on the planet. It wasn't like hidden or something. No, it's just something that evolved and becomes lethal. You had a generation ago, we were able to wipe out smallpox, and we were confident malaria and tuberculosis could be taken out, and we're still dealing with that. So we have those issues. Changes in human activity are cause for this. Urbanization, intensive agriculture, and so on. That's really going to challenge here because of the mega farms that we see. Indiana has a lot of them. Risky behavior, IV drug use, and so on. Global climate change. Spread of diseases, easier travel, efficient shipping, and so on. And then all these are the diseases and outbreaks that have occurred around the world in the last 10 years or so. So is there any good news? I'm kind of depressing you with all this stuff. I am not coming to that class again. I was so bummed out after I left. There's actually a lot of great news. And the really cool stuff is we've got global communications right now. All of you are in touch with your cell phones. Your cell phones are more powerful than the first ships that were launched to outer space on the moon missions. I mean, it's amazing how much more powerful we have right now, and information at a click, which is amazing. So we have that. We have mechanics, microbial genome research that's being done, the biotechnology firms that are advancing the molecular aspects as we speak, new disease surveillance, new global rules, reporting diseases. The network is out there. When SARS first came out, China could not get their arms around this thing. They didn't tell anybody about what was going on. It spread to Toronto. It was a mess. They got their act together. And if you go over there now, their CDC is about as modern as you're going to find. They figured this out, and they're going to be able to hopefully get on top of this should a new disease come out. So, in my opinion, I think, yes, we've got some opportunities here that we didn't have before because we have the technology working for us. We're not working for it. The key is that bacteria first appeared on the earth more than 3 billion years ago. We just showed up, right? And we're relatively new in this whole process. So between the two, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be an ongoing battle. But I think in the end, we're going to win this game, but only if we connect and we communicate and we do it through public health. So your homework next Tuesday. Your homework next Tuesday is this. Go online, and I want you to find the 10 essential, just Google this part, 10 essential public health service elements that are needed for being able to deal with a disaster. Then I've given you the scenario in H5N1. The thing about it is you're going to see them listed 1 through 10. That doesn't mean number 1 is number 1. Based on the scenario, you decide what's going to be number 1, what's going to be number 2, and so on. And then put that list in order for me and then give your reason why you rank them that way. Okay, the total time of that assignment is going to be about 1 hour. If you spend more than 1 hour, you misunderstood the assignment. Go in there, find it, print it out, be able to go through, arrange it in the order that you want, put the reasons why, just a sentence or two, is okay, this is number 1. I think this is most important because of the H5N1, and this is number 10, and that's why it's least important. And then turn that in on a typed paper, just like you did today, with your homework and with your name on it. Okay? Until then, have a great weekend. See you on Tuesday.